Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be talking about some of the most important aspects when it comes to aiming on Fortnite with a controller. This video was actually inspired by a Reddit post from a user named Wizard_K that was titled something along the lines of The Long and Advanced Guide to Fortnite Controller Mechanics, Sticks, and Deadzones. It was a really interesting post that goes super in depth about certain things that controller Fortnite players are always debating about, and he even changed my opinion about a few different things that I've discussed in the past. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing that I want to discuss in this video are control freaks. I've voiced my opinion on control freaks on this channel before, but due to the fact that I personally have never used them, I never really gave too strong of an opinion. It was basically something like, well, if you're struggling with aim, they're probably at least worth trying since they're so cheap, but I can't for sure say if they're actually going to make a significant difference in your gameplay. But the post by Wizard K made a really interesting point about control freaks that pretty much totally changed the way I think about them. He starts off the section about control freaks by saying, a popular way to increase the ease of aiming and control with analog sticks is to increase their height. This is certainly true, and a lot of pros use them, especially in the FPS community. Definitely nothing too crazy here, and I totally agree with that. Back before Fortnite, when I played a lot of Call of Duty, it almost seemed like when you looked at the really good players, more of them did use control freaks than didn't use them. But what's said next is what I found most interesting. For control freaks, I sadly don't recommend them for Fortnite. Notably, a lot of high-end, mechanically gifted players don't use them, such as FaZe Sway, and some players have even switched away from them, X for example. The reason why is that they reduce your mechanical sensitivity too much and broaden your range of motion to a point that isn't practical. Fortnite's a game where you're constantly making large movements and back and forths with a joystick that don't require a lot of precision. Editing, building, etc. don't need the kind of precision boost that control freaks give. If you're trying to make a corner edit, this means that the amount of distance you have to move the joystick in a corner shape increases, regardless of your in-game sensitivity. The longer the stick, the worse this problem presents itself. For double or triple edits, your thumb's gonna have to move that much more. Some people might like the trade-off, more range of motion for a decrease in speed, but on controller where you only have your thumb, I'm not a fan. Aiming actually is a lower amount of actions in this game than building and editing, and those speeds are integral to how good of a player you are. If you can't aim without them, go for it, but I'd recommend just lowering your in-game sensitivity. I don't see much of a reason to use them in Fortnite, and the downsides are plentiful. So I think that pretty much everything you just heard there really does make a lot of sense. Before reading this post, I honestly only considered the positive aspects of control freaks, which almost entirely revolved around aiming. Since having good aim is something that so many players struggle with in Fortnite, I thought the best case scenario when using control freaks was they would make your aim better, and the worst case scenario was that your aim just stayed the same. Now, that may still be true, but it ignores the fact that control freaks don't just impact your aim, they also impact all the other mechanical skills in Fortnite, which are mainly just building and editing. As the post briefly mentioned, building and editing are mechanics that rely way more on quick flicks than aim does, and since the whole purpose of control freaks is to basically limit twitchy and flicky joystick movement, you can kinda see where the problem lies there. And I think that explains why it seems like the majority of really good controller Fortnite players don't use control freaks. Now, despite all that, I do agree with the very end of what Wizard said, which is basically if you already use Control Freaks and you feel like they made a huge improvement to your aim, which I have definitely heard from some people, I'd recommend just keeping them. But for people that don't use them, that may have been considering trying them because they want to improve their aim, I'd advise against that at this point. The next topic I want to discuss in regards to aiming on controller is the Deadzone setting. Much like sensitivity in Fortnite, controller players are constantly debating which Deadzone value is the best for aiming and just playing the game in general. What most people will tell you is that the lower the Deadzone, the better, because it allows you to have more control over subtle stick adjustments while playing. Here's what Wizard K has to say about that in his post. A common myth is that a smaller Deadzone is better. This isn't always true. However, a smaller Deadzone will allow you to make faster movements more precise, and it will substantially increase your edit speed when making multiple edits. Deadzone is a trade-off though. Lowering it will make your gameplay sloppier and more mistake-prone, as small inputs of the joystick now greatly affect your crosshair position. An aiming benefit of lower Deadzones is that you can track players better with slow pushes at higher sensitivities, as well as the overall responsiveness / ease of changing direction. It's a big change that I'd recommend everyone to play around with. The downside is that small movements can now easily throw you off target. He then goes on to summarize all of that by saying, "My recommendation is to lower it as much as you can as long as your aim isn't impacted. If you're an edit-happy player, I do this at the cost of in-game sensitivity, and if you're not, I'd use a larger Deadzone for more controlled shooting, even if it is less responsive." Much like with the first discussion about Control Freaks, I feel like when a lot of people think about Deadzones, they really only consider the potential impact that it'll have on their aim while shooting. But the truth of the matter is, aiming isn't just for shooting. It also impacts editing and to a lesser degree building. Because of that, it makes a lot of sense that lowering your Deadzone will have a positive impact on how fast you can edit. When you have a high Deadzone value, it makes it so that the very beginning of your movement you make with your right stick doesn't register, and that results in wasted movement and slower overall editing time. But with a lower Deadzone, your right stick movement registers right away, therefore eliminating any wasted movement at the very beginning. But when it comes to aiming for shooting, I agree that Deadzone values really are a trade-off. Yes, a lower Deadzone value gives you more control over your aim, which for good players should be a positive thing in the long run, but for a lot of players, a super low Deadzone value may give them too much control to handle, if that makes sense. I think you can kind of compare it to the high sensitivity versus low sensitivity debate for aiming. In theory, a high sensitivity will always be better than a low sensitivity, but the reality is, if you can't handle a high sensitivity, it's gonna hurt you much more than it's gonna help you. The final thing I want to quickly touch on in this video is aim training. There's so many different ways to practice improving your aim in Fortnite, and I think the post by Wizard has a very interesting view on that. He says, on controller, all movement occurs within a small range of motion, so spatial awareness of your thumb is more limited. Because of this, I think that controller players should be more conscious of eye tracking and touch than their thumb. People can feel free to disagree, but I find that playing at a higher sensitivity for long periods of time refines my aim, as does turning off aim assist periodically. You become more conscious of the crosshair position as well as making smaller movements. Now, this is something I found really interesting, and I agree with some parts of it and disagree with other parts. I agree that things like eye tracking and crosshair positioning are super important for aiming, especially on controller, and those skills / actions definitely don't get talked about enough. But I personally disagree with his suggestion that turning off aim assist or raising your sensitivity periodically will actually help your aim improve. I don't doubt that it worked for him, and it may work for other players, but I feel like all that does is build negative muscle memory, which can be problematic when you go back to having aim assist on, or back to your regular sensitivity. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. We talked about control freaks at the very beginning of this video, so I want to know, do you use control freaks on your controller, yes or no? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.